Welcome to Hidden Tai Chi. I want to take a quick second to go over some of the basics because for some of you this might be the first time you take a Tai Chi class, or you've taken Tai Chi but it's a different form, different class. So there's a few basic ideas that I want you to keep in mind so that all of this makes sense. First, we're going to go over some of the theoretical ideas. Very simple, very basic, just so that you have that in your head and so you can understand what I'm talking about and where I'm coming from. And then we'll go over some of the basics, the more physical basics that you need to understand in order to do this correctly. So first of all, what is Tai Chi? First of all, Tai Chi Chuan is the full name, which is the grand ultimate fist. So first of all, the thing to understand, it's a Chinese martial art, which means that a lot of the references are going to be to Chinese philosophy, specifically Taoism. It's also a martial art, which means that it uses martial arts and fighting as its fundamental metaphor for everything that we're going to do. So that's something to keep in mind. But it is an internal martial art, which means it starts from the inside. We're going to deep dive into how the body works, how does the mind work, how the body and mind are integrated as one in order to become an effective martial art. So for most people, 90% of the work is going to be on this integration of mind and body, and the martial art is essentially the language that we use, but we never deal with it. For some people, if you want to, you can actually go into the martial art aspect once we've learned the basics and find that Tai Chi is actually an effective martial art. It takes a little more training, but it is a potential which is there. For everybody else, the martial art aspect is going to be the language that we use in order to deal with issues of balance, issues of power, receiving and projecting power. So there will be constantly talk of conflict, of punching and all that. That is on purpose, because one of the things that it does is it gives you specificity as to the movements. So don't be frightened by some of this stuff. It is a way for you to know what you are doing, which is why I'm always going to explain what the moves mean, so that your mind can be in the correct position. So for example, there's a difference between doing just waving your hand in the air and knowing that this movement is not the hand necessarily rising up, but it's actually the elbow dropping, because you're doing something very specific, right? So this is a deflection, this is a trap, as opposed to this, which would be a ward off, which is brushing away. Two completely different energies. But if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to end up doing them in the same way when actually they're supposed to be different types of moves. So that's why we're always going to go over the martial art aspect of it. Again, this is not because we're not going to go into it. It's not a requirement that you go out and get into fights. But you need to know that the language we're going to use is the language of a martial art. And that language is going to allow us to then deal with deeper issues of how the body works and how the mind works and how to stay calm in a chaotic environment. That's the main purpose of Tai Chi as a martial art. Tai Chi and martial in the sense of how to handle adversity in the world. Not necessarily fighting, but adversity, which we always face on a daily basis, right? Whether it's physical adversity or emotional adversity, it's the same thing. So the language works in all these different levels. The other thing is, because it's an internal martial art and it's Chinese, we're also going to talk about energy. So we're always going to talk about three different levels at which the movements are performed. The level of the body, essentially how the biomechanics of the body moves. The level of the energy, right, this is Qi. So this is energy work. This is where energy flow, breath work comes in, so that the move is not just a movement of the body, movement of the arm, it's also a movement of the energy as it goes through. And then it's also the dimension of the mind, right? So where's the mind? Where's the intent? What are you doing? What are you thinking about as you do the move? So we're always going to be moving back and forth between these three levels. These are three integrated levels. They're not separate. They interlink, they interconnect, and they interfeed with one another. But we're going to start using that language. We're going to be approaching some of the moves from all three angles. So that's something else that you want to keep in mind. A move is never just one thing. It's always the interaction of these three elements: the body, the energy, and the mind, right? Jing, Qi, and Shen in Chinese. So that's where everything that we do is going to come from. We'll see later on, there's also theories that are applied to the general movement, but that's going to be for later. For now, the thing to remember is There's three aspects of yourself that we're going to be engaging in: the body, the energy, and the mind. And that this is a martial art, or originated as a martial art, which means that we're going to use the language of fighting, of conflict, in order to be specific about the movements and how we move. That's really what you need to keep in mind as we move forward on with this.